from the All Indiana Podcast Network.
It's time for real conversation about the real issues that affect our communities.
Poverty, education, equality, and more.
This is Real Talk.
Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Welcome to Real Talk on the All Indiana Podcast Network. I am Reverend Charles Harrison, and on this episode, we will be talking about school safety in Marion County. Should we have metal detectors in middle school and high school today because of all the school shootings that we have seen across the country and the high rise in urban youth violence that we are seeing in the city? Welcome to Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison, and I am your guest host today, and thank you so much for joining me today. Today I want to talk about something that is, for some, it is an important conversation, particularly for those of us who are parents and have children in school, in light of over the last 2 decades, the number of school shootings that we have seen across the country. Yesterday, I received a text from my youngest child, my daughter, who is a sophomore in high school, and she texted me yesterday that the school was on lockdown, and my daughter seemed to be very concerned about the school being on lockdown. She really didn't know what really was going on, other than they had to remain in their classrooms. For her, that was alarming. I also have a son in that same high school. Both of my kids attend Shortridge High School here in Indianapolis, and I didn't hear from him, but I certainly did hear from my daughter. Later, I did get an email from the school saying that the school was on lockdown from the principal, and that someone in the school had a handgun, that a gun had been discovered. They didn't know if there were any other youth in the school that may have had handguns, and because of that, they were going to keep all of the kids locked down until they could, do more investigation and try to figure out what was going on. Well, what alarmed me about this is I was reading the email from the principal of the school at Shortridge High School, was that this was not the first time. This was not the first incident that someone had a gun at the school. This was, to me, a continuing theme. And certainly, as I have been to visit the school on a number of occasions to, pick up my kids or to take something there for my kids, I know how easy it is really to get a gun into a school. Some of you who may not know, I'm not just a local pastor in the city, but I am the leader of a faith-based organization called the Indianapolis 10-Point Coalition that tries to address the issue of youth urban violence as it disproportionately impacts young men of color between the ages of 12 years old and 24 years old. And, in the patrols that I do, normally I'm out on the street 3, sometimes 4 nights a week in patrolling in hotspot areas. I have seen over the years just this growing number of young people with unlawful guns, on the streets. It seems like today that there's a lot of kids out there that, have guns, and some kids say they have guns as a means of protection. They're trying to protect themselves against, other kids who have guns that they perceive as a threat. So they want to protect themselves. Certainly others have guns because of the activity that they may be involved in, whether or not it's selling drugs, or they may be in a gang or a neighborhood clique. these individuals carry guns. And certainly we have seen, over the last 23 years in Indianapolis, an escalation in youth violence in the city. Certainly it is a concern for many of us. And as a parent, as I think about my children being in school, I think all of us parents want to feel like that when we send our kids to school, that our kids are in a safe environment, that they're there to learn, and that when school is over at the end of the day, our kids will be sent home from the school by those who work in the school, and not wanting to fear for the safety of your children. You would hope that being in school would be a safe place for your children, and certainly I do. But yesterday, when I got the text from my daughter, you tend to know your children, and I could sense from my daughter some uneasiness about this lockdown. And she has shared with me in the past her fear, of there being a shooter in the school, and the fear that, if there is a shooter in the school, that something might happen to her. And one time, my daughter was telling me that if a shooter came into school and she was on the second floor, and I think that's where her classes were last year, that she was going to jump out the window. And I said, Jalen, you can't jump out the window, honey, because the second floor is so high, and probably the jump itself will kill you. But I could sense in that conversation with my daughter that there was a lot of anxiety just around that issue, that fear that someone could come into the school with a gun and start shooting up a whole lot of people. Now, my daughter, doesn't really live in a neighborhood, certainly where there is shooting every day, like some kids, live in that kind of environment where they may hear shots fired on a fairly regular basis in the course of a week, maybe multiple times even, in a day. But what got my attention was, I think my daughter is fearful, and I could sense from my son, who is, 17 years old, a junior in high school, that a lot of the friends that he knows, he has shared with me, and kids just that he goes to school with there, have guns. They don't always bring it to school with them, but my son did share with me that there are times he thought that some of the kids may have had guns in the school, or certainly hid the gun somewhere around the school, and the kids would say it was for their protection. Now here's an issue that certainly would be controversial when we start talking about school safety. I want my kids to be safe in school. I think that any parent out there would want their kids to be safe in school. Understanding that we live in a different era today. This is a different time. This is much different from, when I was in high school, some 40-some years ago. I never had to worry about, any kid bringing a gun to school. The most we ever did was had fist fights with one another, but there was never the concern that a fist fight would lead to deadly violence. There was never the concern about, someone bringing a gun to school and someone could be shot and injured, or shot and killed in school, or someone could bring a gun to school and with an extended magazine, large numbers of people could be killed, or bring an assault rifle to school and someone could open up fire and kill a lot of people at in a matter of seconds. You never had to worry about those things. I never had that kind of fear growing up. But now, I have two sets of children. My two oldest children are out of school. They're adults now, but my two younger children are still in school. And as a parent, you start asking the question, should schools do more to protect the students that attend those schools. And let's go a little bit further. How can schools prevent guns from getting in schools? If the schools are not checking students as they come into the school, either checking, to see if they have a gun on them or, in their clothes or in a book bag, then it would seem like to me, if those kind of things are not being done, that it would be easy for a kid or kids to get guns in school. And the question becomes, are we at a point in time in the history of this country that maybe we ought to put metal detectors in schools, and kids, who attend school or students should have to go through those metal detectors before they're allowed to enter into the buildings? Now, I know this is pretty controversial to even talk about that, but, in Indianapolis, and I don't think this is just an issue for one of the particular school systems, in the city of Indianapolis or in this county, but I think that in light of what's going on with the proliferation of unlawful guns in the hands of young people today, and what tends to happen is that young people tend today to settle their conflicts with some form of violence, whether it is a knife or whether it is a handgun. That seems to be increasing today. It seems to be getting worse. And it looks like that young people today are getting younger and younger who are possessing handguns. And if that is the case, for whatever reason, what can we do as a society? What can the school systems do to better protect the students that attend those schools? Now, in many of the school systems on the East Coast, when you talk about cities like New York City, these metal detectors are already in those schools, and students are not allowed to come in many of the schools in New York and in some other cities on the East Coast without going through those metal detectors. Are we at a point in the city of Indianapolis that maybe we need to look at that? This is Reverend Charles Harrison on Real Talk on the All Indiana Network, podcast network. And for those who may be joining, and I'm really talking about this issue of school violence and guns being brought into school. Should we keep the policy that many of the school systems have here in Indianapolis, where they just kind of let the students just come into the building? There's no real search or check that I'm aware of that are checking book bags and are patting down students to see whether or not they have a gun. My concern is that something bad may happen before we, really start looking at better ways to secure the safety of students in these schools. I'm not for sure that all the schools have police officers in the school. Even if you have one or two, they can't be everywhere at the same time. And if kids are beefing with one another and there is a gun on a student, or there is a gun somewhere close by outside the school building, are kids safe today in schools, whether they be more so public schools? I'm not for sure what private schools are doing. But I think that is an issue that in the city of Indianapolis we really need to discuss. I tend to be today more for some kind of form of metal detectors or wand or something to check the students as they come into the school. I know that may be time consuming. I know some will say that it may be too costly to put metal detectors in all of the schools, in Indianapolis, whether they be IPS or Pike Township or Washington Township or whatever, township it may be. But I think we're at a place today that we really have to understand that there doesn't seem to be any boundaries for some of our youth today. I think we're living in a time where many of our young people have no moral compass and sadly no regard for the sanctity of human life. And I would not want a fight to break out in school and someone pull out a gun and some student in that school is shot and injured or shot and killed, or multiple students who may be innocent bystanders may get caught in the crossfire and may be shot or injured or shot or killed. I really think that this is something that as a city, we really need to have conversations about. And I think the school systems need to have a serious conversation as to how do they better protect the school students in their particular school system. I don't think what we're doing today is working. I really don't. I think it's just too easy to get a gun in a school today, and I don't want my children or any other parents' children to be the victim of violence. I just think we have to be realistic about the times that we're living in today, and that sadly too many of our children are using violence to settle their conflicts. So I'm advocating that we beef up the security at the schools in the city. I'm also advocating that either children be warned or there are metal detectors placed in middle schools and high schools. I think you really have to go down to middle school because several years ago in one of the middle schools that my son attended when he was in middle school, I know he shared with me that there were several of the students at that school that had guns. I had a conversation with the principal about some of the stuff that my son was sharing, and that the school system, really needed to beef up the security. I think the school system did. That particular school acted on the information that they had received. And I think other students were expressing their concern about students that they believed that had guns. And I think, with my daughter, I don't think any of these students ought to have to go through that kind of trauma, be fearful of what could happen at school because of their fear that students in the school may have brought a gun in the school. Yesterday, when I got the text and the school system said that they were able to locate the gun and the student with the gun, I'm wondering if that was the only gun in the school. I'm wondering if there were other students that had guns in that school that the school was not aware of. And I know that the principal and the teachers in the school, are doing the best that they can to keep our children safe. But maybe it's time that we go a little further. Maybe we have to come to the realization that this is not 1970 anymore. This is not 1990. It is not even 2000 anymore. We're in 2022. And we are seeing dramatic increases in urban youth violence all over the country. And we're seeing it here in Indianapolis. I know just recently there have been several young people who have been shot. And sadly, there have been young people this year, too many, that have been killed by gun violence. I know we have had some close calls at some schools. That doesn't normally get reported because the school systems pretty much want to keep that hush-hush. They don't want the larger public to know that the crisis they're dealing with. In a lot of these schools, you do have the cliques, you have gangs that are in these schools. You have individuals that are beefing with one another. You may have different cliques that are beefing with one another. You may have different groups that may be neighborhood driven that are beefing with one another. And all it takes is one individual to be able to get a gun in school and to pull that gun out and fire shots that may injure or even kill other students in the school. I say it's time for us to be more proactive here in Indianapolis. I believe that every school system needs to look at providing some kind of metal detector equipment in their schools or wands to be able to search students before they enter into the school, into the classroom, to ensure that all students in that school are going to be protected. Now, I can hear some of the people in the community now saying, well, that's going to be racially biased against black kids, that black teenagers are going to, experience the brunt of, putting metal detectors in these schools, that is going to impact them the greatest. Yeah, we see the impact of the violence on the black community every day in the city of Indianapolis. We see the number of individuals that are shot. We had 6 or 7 people shot in the city just last night. We're averaging 2 or 3 people shot, every day in this city. We are approaching for the 3rd year in a row the possibility of over 200 homicides in the city. So obviously we have a violence problem in the city. Obviously we have a problem with youth violence in this city. And if we're going to protect our children, then we have to consider some security measures that better protect all of our children. I don't want anybody's child to be the victim of violence, whether it be a stabbing or whether it be a shooting. Just like when I send my 2 children to school every day, Monday through Friday, I want to make sure that my 2 children are safe. I want them in a safe environment. I want them in a safe school. I don't want my children to have to worry about whether or not they might become the victim of some kind of violent act in the school that they attend. No child should have to worry about that. So I'm saying to the school boards and to the superintendents of these school systems in Indianapolis and the larger Marion County area, maybe it's time that we start looking at other ways to better secure these schools. And maybe metal detectors are warning the students as they come in. Maybe we're at the point now that we may have to look at that. I know that may be controversial, but it's really going to be controversial if something happens in one of these schools and some student is either shot or injured or shot or killed, or we have multiple students that are shot or injured or shot and killed. We all know that we have a problem in our society today. We all know that. We all know that there is a proliferation of unlawful guns on the streets of almost every major city in America. That is a fact. We know that a lot of teenagers are carrying guns. That is a fact. These are some of the same students that are in your middle schools and high schools, whether it be Pike, whether it be IPS, whether it be Warren Township or Washington Township or Franklin Township, whatever township it may be. We all know that that is the reality. So how do we best protect our children today so that they can go to school in a safe environment, get their education, and not be fearful of being a victim of violence? I'm advocating to all the school systems in Indianapolis and Marion County that you have to do more. That what you are doing right now is not enough to really protect the students that attend your schools, whether it be middle school or high school, and that you need to look at other means to better secure these schools. Now, you may say to me that a metal detector or whining students are not the best way to do that. Well, if it's not the best way to do that, then tell us parents what is the best way to do it so that we don't have students getting guns in schools that might lead to someone in the school being shot or injured or shot or killed. Tell me what you can do to prevent a knife from getting in the school so that we don't have a student that gets stabbed and injured or stabbed and killed. We know what's going on in the streets. And in the streets, some of these same children that are attending your middle schools and high schools are on these streets with weapons that can kill and seriously injure individuals. I contend that they're in your school. I contend that some of these students are bringing guns into these schools. God forbid that something may happen. But if we don't do something to better secure these schools, then something bad is going to happen. And I want to sound the alarm that we need to better secure these schools. I don't want my daughter sending me a text talking about the school is on lockdown and she's afraid. I don't want to have to keep rushing to the school because my children are concerned about their safety. More has to be done to protect all of the students that attend these schools so that all of these children are safe and they don't have to be in school in fear, worrying about a fight breaking out at school and then someone pulling a gun out and firing shots. Nobody should have to worry about that. So something more needs to be done. Us parents should not continue to get emails and phone calls from the school telling us that you had to lock the school down because someone had a gun. If you are frustrated by it, school administration and principals and teachers, then so are we as parents. So if all of us are frustrated about this, and it's beginning to happen more and more, then it's time for us to do something about that. It's time for us to put security measures in place in these schools so that we can better protect the students and the teachers from any potential act of violence. So I'm calling on the school system to do more. If you don't want to follow my recommendation of, bringing in metal detectors in these schools across Indianapolis and Marion County, or bringing in wands and officers to wand these children as they come into the school to search their book bags before they're in school, then come up with some solution that is better than what you have in place now. Because what you have in place now is not working, and it's easy to get guns in your schools. I have said this to school officials. I have said this to IMPD, and I'm now saying it to the greater city of Indianapolis and whoever may be listening to this podcast anywhere in this country, that what we're doing to protect our schools is not adequate enough. It does not address the potential threats that are out there today. We cannot continue to ignore this. This has to be a priority, and we must do more than what we're doing so that no child in Indianapolis or in Marion County will ever be the victim while they're in school of gun violence or someone taking a knife and stabbing them, because that knife nor that gun should not be in the school. And because there are guns that are getting in the school, it demands some action from school boards and from school administrations to do more to protect the students of all of the school systems in Indianapolis and Marion County so that these children are protected, they are not traumatized by these school lockdowns, and they are not fearful to go to school. Thank you so much for listening to Reverend Charles Harrison today on my commentary on Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison. I hope that you have enjoyed Real Talk today, and join me next time as I bring you more Real Talk about the real issues that affect our communities here in Indianapolis and across the country. Be sure to follow and subscribe to this podcast and share it on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you again for joining me, and I pray that you have a blessed and awesome day. This is Reverend Harrison.
This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast.
And be sure to check out other great podcasts on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Online now at allindianapodcast.com.